Welcome to This Week in Movie History, a look at the most interesting things that happened during this week in movie history. We'll kick things off with September 25th, 1981, with the release of the horror cult classic, The Bogans. Monster turtle things, the titular Bogans, emerge from an abandoned mine and terrorize the surrounding area. It's mediocre at best, but The Bogans is notable for one primary reason. The title is incredibly fun to say. The Bogans. September 26, 1986 also saw the US release of Crocodile Dundee, starring Paul Hogan as the now famous master of the Australian outback transplanted to New York City. It was a gigantic hit with the second biggest box office gross of the year after Top Gun, defining Australia for an entire generation of Americans.
For washing your backside, right?
Whether that's a good or a bad thing probably depends on whether you're an Australian who works in tourism or not. A second film followed in 1988 with less success, and a third film, Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles, somehow got released in 2001. Neither sequel managed to contribute anything as iconic as the first film, though, which is still quoted 32 years later.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
Serenity, Joss Whedon's theatrical directing debut, and his attempt to provide a proper ending to the canceled cult favorite show Firefly, saw release on September 30th, 2005. Despite positive fan reaction and anticipation, it opened at number 2 for the weekend and was a financial disappointment. Die-hard Firefly fans still hope for the return of the franchise in TV or film form, but this movie is now 13 years old. You know it was 13 years old when Serenity came out? Disney's Aladdin. You gotta let it go, folks. It was a long time ago. Finally, on September 27, 1945, Roberto Rossellini's Rome Open City was released in Italy. While it wasn't much of a hit there, internationally it brought attention to the burgeoning Neorealist movement in Italy. Italian Neorealism is defined by its focus on progressive themes, poor and working class characters, and stark, almost documentary-style camera work. Rome Open City wasn't the first Italian neorealist film after the fall of Mussolini in 1943, but Rome Open City is what made the film community outside of Italy take notice of this new style. Rossellini's film tells the story of resistance members in Rome in 1944. Rome had been declared an open city, meaning that the city government has acknowledged that capture is inevitable and they will no longer put up any defense against it. Nazis search for the resistance as regular citizens attempt to live what lives they can in the rubble of the war. Rome Open City was shot on location in the actual streets of post-war Rome amid the destruction and bombed-out ruins that had yet to be repaired after the recent surrender of Germany. Rossellini hired mostly non-professional actors for all but the most major roles, and had to scrounge film stock from any source he could to finish the movie. While it was more melodramatic than later neorealist films, it still has the trademark minimalist camera work and focus on real working-class people. There's an emphasis on the ordinariness of the characters, and Rossellini often lets mundane scenes play out in real time, refusing to manipulate the viewer with editing. The dialogue overlaps and interrupts itself like real conversations do, foregoing the stage drama artifice of traditional filmmaking that was the norm at the time. The Italian neorealist trend lasted into the early 1950s, barely a decade, but at its height gave us phenomenal films such as Rossellini's Paisan, Vittorio De Sica's The Bicycle Thieves, and Federico Fellini's La Strada. Despite its relatively short period of prominence and relative unpopularity with Italian audiences who preferred escapist movies to reliving the horrors they just experienced firsthand, it was tremendously influential on international filmmakers. American film noir owes more than a little to the harsh look of neorealism, and the French New Wave was a direct descendant. But that's a whole other video. That's the week of September 24th in the books, taking you from the Bogans to Italian neorealism. We like to cast a wide net here at CineFix, so be sure to subscribe and join us again in 2 weeks for This Week.